We will now call to order the January 12th, 2023 working session of the Abington Township Board of Commissioners. May I have a roll call, please?
Commissioners Brodsky, Rothman,
Here.
DiPlacido,
Here.
Vaughn,
Here.
Thompson,
Here.
Weingrab,
Here.
Henry,
Here.
DePone, Carswell,
Here.
Spiegelman,
Here.
Bowl,
Here.
Schreiber,
Here.
Bowman,
Here.
Vice President Fahey,
Here.
President Hecker.
Here. Thank you. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes from the working session of December 8, 2022, and I so move.
Second.
Second.
They have been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The minutes are approved. We will now open it up for public comments on the 3 agenda items listed under new business for this evening's meeting. And since there are no members of the public in the room, we'll turn to Zoom.
Ms. Slayman, you're unmuted.
So you just, Laura Lehman, Meadowbrook, you just heard me, and by the way, unbelievable that we all had to say we were from Meadowbrook when you allowed somebody from another township to speak as long as he wanted, so I'm not sure. Let me just tell you that in the last meeting, I told you that a $100 million property was sold for $10.
Ms. Lehman, do you have comments on any of the 3 agenda items for the working session this
Yes,
evening?
This is item C, the deed registration.
Thank you for pointing that out.
The name on the ownership at the Montgomery County records for that property that is, according to the owner.
Yeah, Ms. Lehman, that property is not part of the discussion of that agenda item. If you have a comment about the ordinance deed registration,
I'm making it, Mr. Hecker.
no, you're not. You're actually continuing your conversation from the previous meeting. We are now in a different
I'm not,
session.
Mr. Hecker. Mr. Hecker, I am making a comment about something that involves the deed registration.
Please continue.
What we have in this property that I mentioned at the last meeting is an entity that has changed its name so many times, nobody can tell who the entity is. And the correct name of that entity is not in the property records. And that was a long-standing issue that Mr. Clark knows all about, them using different names. And the township actually aided that by calling them, one minute they were Old York LLC, the next minute they were Metropolitan Properties, the next minute they were something else. And when residents tried to look them up in court, they couldn't find them because of the number of names. So what I'm telling you is that when we don't have the control to even get the proper property owner, and you're trying to get deed registration literally just so that you can get the money, okay? So this is just another way that the township wants to take money, but not do anything. So if you're doing something, the thing that needs to be done for the money that you take for deed registration is to make sure that the properties are properly registered. Okay, and I do want you all to understand that this property did not have sprinklers because they fought not to do the electric, and they fought not to do the plumbing, and they fought not to go behind the walls with the black mold and the rodents and everything else. And that's why that property is like that. And all of you should be so disgraced that you didn't allow that to be fixed. You knew what was happening when it was going on, all of you that were here. And those that weren't here, I approached and I tried very hard to tell you, and you didn't want to hear it. So this is a money grab here, but when you grab the money, you don't do anything for it. As I said, you charged me $355 for a roof permit, and all he did was look up the contractor by the state and file it. That's all he did for $355. That's a money grab. This township deserves better than that. And this particular deed registry is a money grab. And it's a money grab that if you were going to do something about properties like 100 York that somehow don't have the right name of the right owner on the property records, well, then maybe there would be something good that came of it. But if you just take the money and spend it the way you're spending it for developers, nothing good will come of that. I am stunned that you keep doing this. So that's the end of my comments, but this thing with 100 York, you need to understand that it was on purpose, and they need to put in sprinklers if they go behind the walls. That's why they didn't before. And these people are the victims of you allowing them to do. I'm done.
We will now move on to our new business. The first item of business is for us to discuss and consider renewing an agreement between the Pennsylvania State University on behalf of its Penn State Abington campus and the Township of Abington. Rich, I mean, I can start and then
However you'd like to proceed.
and then you can flesh out the detail. I mean, we have an existing MOU with Penn State Abington that is set to expire June 30th of this year. And when Chancellor Deli Carpini assumed office, she had expressed an interest to both Rich and myself as the ward commissioner in revisiting the MOU. A large part of that involved them paying for the services of Tom McEnany before they had their own security force on campus. And as it turns out, they have not been utilizing Mr. McEnany to the level that was specified in the MOU. To her credit, Chancellor Deli Carpini was not interested in what she wanted to do was repurpose those dollars for a different purpose. And what they're proposing, and I'll let Mr. Manfredi speak to it in detail, is actually the creation of a sustainable internship program for the township, where college students who are enrolled at Penn State Abington would have the opportunity to participate in a structured program working with Mr. Manfredi and other township staff on projects of importance for the township while earning course credit. And, you know, to my view, and I think it's a wonderful idea. I mean, to me, it's that piece of it is sort of a no-brainer. And very little else about the MOU is changing, if I recall correctly. But Mr. Manfredi, why don't you chime in?
I don't know how much more I could add. That really summarizes it well. The internship program will be coordinated directly with Penn State. It will be most likely 2 people working out of my office. The initial focus is going to be on communications, and the others is going to be on research. We have a number of programs that we have begun researching, permit fees, and there's a number of things, especially with the communications, that we're looking to expand on. And this will allow us to do so much more without cost, adding basically overhead. So it was a great idea. It's meaningful to the university because their students are getting real experience.
Yeah.
And it's meaningful for us because we are able to meet a lot of what you want to do with strategic plan and however else, and there's 2 quarters in the jar, with the strategic plan and other things that you've been trying to accomplish.
Could also
And
be
you've said it all.
it could also be a pipeline for future employees, you know, based
Yes.
on experience, and that would be fantastic. I'll just say that in my experience working with Chancellor Deli Carpini, her commitment to the community is robust, and I've really enjoyed hearing her plans on how to further strengthen that. So this, to me, would be a step in that direction. So open the floor for questions, comments, go from there. Are you hitting the mic, Commissioner Weingrad? Go ahead. That's your tell, when you reach in and
I go
point
like
your
this?
finger. Yes.
I saw under paragraph 5 of the proposed agreement, the internship program, it says that there's an internship program each year for up to 2 student interns. So, I mean, I don't know, is that something that was negotiated? Is there a reason that we can't have more? You know, bring more people in?
I don't know that there's a reason.
It's the idea was to set a level where they're not giving us more or taking away from us in terms of dollars, and that which is manageable. So 2 was the number that would fit into the, I'll call it a cap of what the spending is.
I'm sorry. I mean, I think it's an excellent idea. I think the township could use it. I think the students from Penn State Abington could use it. That's what I'm saying. I'd like to see it used more. I think it's a win for everybody, but that was just my question about the two. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions? You look like you wanted to say something, Commissioner Henry.
I'm just very excited about this. As a college educator, I just love the opportunity for these students to be able to get in and see what happens in the buildings and seeing how it goes and how it grows and how they can grow being part of it. So this is really cool. I was excited to hear about this, so thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schreiber.
One of the reasons that it might be too, I'm just putting this out there, is you also have to have a faculty person that,
Yeah, good point.
yeah,
That'd be the faculty.
is working with the, so they might not be able to get that many each semester. So,
Yeah. That makes sense. Commissioner Vaughn.
I just wanted to say that as somebody that did like I did my internship with my university, working with the university office in a similar capacity to this, that it gives you, you know, when you graduate college and you go to get a job, everybody's looking for you to have some type of real life experience, but you also get to, I feel like high school students and a lot of residents don't have a lot of civics education and training, so this helps with that, as well as giving them the opportunity to learn what real life experience is. So I don't see why it would be a bad thing. It would be great if we could have more, but maybe we could start with 2 and then later expand if that's if we're able to do that capacity-wise later on.
Thank you. Yeah.
I thought so because I was trying to get an intern for something else once, and I went through the whole procedure of how you get a faculty member to follow the person, so yeah, I know it's a lot.
So this would take effect July 1st. Is that correct, Rich? It would take effect July 1st? Or the intern's going to start sooner than that?
As soon as this passes, we're going to
Oh,
communicate
okay.
with them.
Even better. Okay.
Yeah.
So unless there's any disagreement, the next step for this would be to be on next month's business agenda for a formal vote. Okay. We'll move on to item B, and this is for us to discuss and consider authorizing advertisement of a traffic safety ordinance amending our favorite chapter, Chapter 156, Vehicles and Traffic. You want to speak to that, Manager Manfredi?
Certainly. If you recall, there were issues arising at various areas of the township, at the various zones, where for a period of time, there were parking zones, permits being issued, and it was all being administered and enforced through the then Code Enforcement Department. When this came to our attention, Code and PD got together, and my office as well, kind of coordinated to make sure that we looked at what makes the most sense. The fees that were charged, I would say Deputy Chief Porter, Ms. Gargan in the police department, Ms. McIlvain and Ms. Ham, all worked together to try to come up with an ordinance that made sense. When we first talked about this with the board, there was concern over the fees. Should we be jumping from $3 to $750 or $2 to $750? And the first question that came about is, do we want to increase the fees for these parking permits, or do we want to keep them where they were? And I think administratively and hearing from various commissioners individually through communications, the idea was to not make this a program that it increases the costs for people to park in their neighborhoods, but leave the fee where it is. It'll offset some cost, but it'll also help identify primarily where people can park and what the zones actually are. And that's really as simple as this gets. This is really just putting the administration and the enforcement in the PD instead of code, and establishing what zones parking will be and the specifics around those parking zones.
So then the fee remains at $3, is that correct?
If that is where it ends up landing, then yes.
Okay.
I believe there was initially, one of the drafts showed the renewal fee at $750,
Yeah.
but no, that was erroneously in there, so we corrected that and put that in here.
Okay. I will open the floor to comments or questions from my colleagues. Commissioner Henry.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I don't want to see the number going up at all. I think that the purpose of it is the information and the registration, and to be able to distinguish who's supposed to be there and to deter other folks from parking there instead. So it's not about the money at all, and this is about just making sure that these are registered and identified, and that's it.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Oh, Commissioner Bull. Sorry, I couldn't see your hand in the background on your window.
No worries. Thanks, President Hecker. I wanted to thank Manager Manfredi and several people from the APD for working on this. One of the things that triggered this discussion was a conversation around Tague Avenue in Ward 13 and some of the challenges that residents in that very densely populated block have with having a car rental agency at the end of their block and cars remaining on the block for weeks and weeks and weeks at a time. So I think we came up with a creative solution that doesn't necessarily solve all the problems, but and that is a time-limited parking, so it's not permit parking, but time-limited parking that would also allow for the residents to have permits, so that, for instance, visitors or children who live in, I guess who would be visitors as well, children of residents who have cars registered outside of Tague Avenue or visiting their parents wouldn't necessarily be ticketed. So I wanted to request that before we move this onto the full board, that we add some language around Tague Avenue between 2315 and 2327 to one of the zones. I think it would be Zone 3, going by the other addresses. Do you think that's right, Deputy Chief Porter? Okay. Yeah, and just allow us to add the Tague Avenue residents to apply for permits as well as having the time-limited parking there.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bull. So just so that I'm clear, the request is to add language to the draft that we see tonight to add Tague Avenue into its Section C, Zone 3.
Correct. And specifically, I could give it to you now. The north side of Tague Avenue between 2315 and 2327.
Okay.
That would allow us to be consistent with the time-limited parking that we already discussed at previous board meetings.
Got it.
So noted.
Okay, so Manager Manfredi has that noted, and I don't think there'll be any objection to your request to include that in the revised draft ordinance.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Again, I want to echo Commissioner Henry's great comments. I mean, this is a relatively, I don't want to say small, but it's a procedural request, and it seems a little bit boring when we think about the grand scheme of and the scope of the comments we had tonight about some of the really, really large issues. But this is a quality of life issue, and the residents will really very much appreciate it. So thanks again for the work on this. To
Thanks,
the police department
Commissioner
and
Bull.
the manager. Yep.
Vice President Vahey.
I just want to say, I might need to add 2 blocks to this. I don't have alignment from the neighbors right now, but we might need to take this back up in the spring. Just a heads up.
One of the other changes in here that I think is important to note, again, in talking with, in individual conversations with commissioners and with talking with Deputy Chief Porter, just want to remind people that we're taking this from 5 residential parking permits being issued to residents or guests at 1 postal address to 3, so that everyone understands. We're going from 5 to 3.
5 to 3, yep. Thank you. Any further comments or questions? Commissioner Spiegel.
President Hecker,
Yes, sir.
if I may, I don't want to extend the meeting too long by jumping on the thank you train.
We appreciate that.
And yet I will. No, paralleling Commissioner Bowles' situation with Tague Avenue, about which I learned a great deal. I would be remiss if I did not extend profound thanks, deep gratitude to the Abington Police Department, and particularly Deputy Chief Porter, for all of his ongoing help with parking and many, many other things. A sort of similar parking situation to Tague Avenue on the 1900 block of Guernsey. The help that he gives me, Deputy Chief Porter gives me quite literally every day, is is keeping me alive. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Spiegelman. So this will then appear as a motion to advertise at the February board meeting. Is that correct? With the amendment, and if Matt's able to get his residence, no, not happening before that. Okay, fair enough. All right, we'll move on to the final item this evening, and this is to discuss and consider advertising an ordinance deed registration by the county. And again, I'm going to turn to you, Manager Manfredi.
And if I may, while we're on the issue of parking, and this is of particular interest to Commissioner Vahey, I'm sure. As you know, Deputy Chief Porter, Traffic Safety, we have been talking for some time about moving away from meters and going to some other modern technology, whether it be, I won't use particular trade names, but where you could do it by app.
By app, yeah.
So we are in the process
That's great.
of working through that, and that'll be coming to you in the next few months as well.
That's excellent. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I will move on to the next item.
Thank you.
The business owners of Keswick Village will really appreciate that.
So the next item on the agenda, this actually was something that was discussed a few years ago, and in discussions then with the Fire Marshal's office and others, there were benefits to not repealing this ordinance and relying solely on the county, but to keep it in-house. But as technology has changed and as we are trying to become more efficient in how we do things through technology, as well as the human element and the human resource with talent, that we thought we might be able to take a look at enacting this ordinance, moving away from us duplicating what's happening at the county, which would actually save people money. We're not actually taking in more money, we're actually taking in less money. And with that, I think it'd be more appropriate, since this really was managed by Mr. McEnany, for him to address this.
Okay.
So I'll call on Mr. McEnany, Director, Fire and Emergency Services.
Thank you, Manager Manfredi. Good evening, Mr. President, and ladies and gentlemen of the board.
Good evening.
Before you is a proposal to actually eliminate the requirement for registering a deed with the township upon purchase of the property. I'm reading from notes. So currently, a new property owner is required to register their deed with the township within 2 days of registering it at the county recorder of deeds. The original underlying ordinance actually dates back to 1938, when obviously the technology wasn't there, and we needed to be able to know what properties were owned in our township. Abington Township is currently one of only 7 municipalities in Montgomery County that still requires a local deed registry. The county provides the deed recording information to us on a regular basis, at least monthly, if not sooner, as they enter it in. It's not quite real time, but they do send us a download of all of the properties as they're being registered on every several weeks to every month. One of the reasons why we wanted to keep it in-house, particularly during COVID, was like everything else, everything got backed up, and it was causing some issues, because one of the main benefits of the local registry was for people that purchased a home and wanted to do pull permits immediately to do renovations. If they were waiting for the county to send us the information, it took quite a while. That's no longer really an issue now. And so one of the things that we also looked at in discussing with the solicitor when we were looking at proposing this repeal is if people want to still, when people want to pull permits and things like that, when they do a transfer of property, they would just have to show an executed agreement of sale, proof of ownership, and that would be enough for us to be able to issue those permits without having to do full deed registry. Just to give you some statistics, we process approximately 1,000 deeds per year. So under our statute or our ordinance, that's $10. That's about $10,000 that we would be kind of removing in income. But to put that into perspective, staff hours is approximately 400 hours of staff hours to process these deeds in order to do the registry, in the ballpark of about $11,500 in staff time. I know everything doesn't come down to dollars and cents, but in this case, it's a duplication of services that's provided by the county and will really not hinder any township or residential or any of our homeowners operations at all. So we would, propose that this will be good for the township, good for the homeowners, and that's about all I have for you.
Thank you, Mr. McEnany. Commissioner Bowman.
As someone who stopped over here 50, 60 times to get this stamp on deeds, this is long overdue.
Yeah.
They are right on top of things up at the county, so it'll be good.
Well,
Thanks.
to summarize, we're being asked to update an ordinance that was enacted when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president. So just, any further comments or questions from members of the board? Okay, so this will also be on the February meeting as a motion to advertise. Okay, with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.